I'm Jessie Doyle. This is my final mythology class presentation, and I'll be analyzing The Lord of the Rings. The Lord of the Rings trilogy is an epic tale of good versus evil, leaving the comfort of one's home to traverse foreign lands in the name of a quest, encountering magic and mystery, resisting temptation, death and rebirth, and love. It has been adapted many times, from page to animation to the big screen, and is largely responsible for the birth of the fantasy genre itself. Basically, a perfect fit for the formula of what makes a myth. I am probably most familiar with the movie adaptations, so for that and the sake of time, I will only be reading a summary of the first movie. The Fellowship of the Ring. The film begins with a summary of the prehistory of the Ring of Power. Long ago, 20 rings existed, 3 for elves, 7 for dwarves, 9 for men, and 1 made by the Dark Lord Sauron in Mordor, which would rule all the others. Sauron poured all his evil and his will to dominate into this ring. An alliance of elves and humans resisted Sauron's ring and fought against Mordor. They won the battle, and the ring fell to Isildur, the son of the king of Gondor. But just as he was about to destroy the ring in Mount Doom, he changed his mind and held on to it for himself. Later, he was killed, and the ring fell to the bottom of the sea. The creature Gollum discovered it and brought it to his cave. Then he lost it to the hobbit Bilbo Baggins. The movie cuts to an image of the hobbit's peaceful Shire years later, where the wizard Gandalf has come to celebrate Bilbo's 111th birthday. The party is an extravagant occasion with fireworks and revelry, and Bilbo entertains children with tales of his adventures. In the middle of a rambling speech, however, he puts on the ring, which makes him invisible, and runs to his house to pack his things and leave the Shire. Gandalf meets Bilbo back in his house and tells him he must give up the ring. Eventually, Bilbo agrees to entrust it to his nephew Frodo. Gandalf senses that the ring is gaining power over Bilbo. We see a flash of Mordor, and hooded horsemen, the ring wraiths, leave its gates. The scene shifts to Gandalf, who rushes to a library to sift through ancient scrolls. As the ring wraiths begin to close in on Bilbo's house, Gandalf returns to Frodo and throws the ring into Bilbo's hearth. Mysterious letters appear on the ring's surface. Only then does Gandalf realize that this ring is actually Sauron's ring. Gandalf explains to Frodo that the ring and Sauron are one. He longs to find it, and it longs to find him. Gandalf has learned that Sauron has kidnapped Gollum, and that Gollum has revealed that Bilbo has the ring. The ring must leave the Shire, or it will endanger all the hobbits. Gandalf cannot take it himself, since as a wizard, he will wield too much power with the ring. He determines that Frodo must take it. Gandalf explains that if Frodo puts on the ring, it will draw Sauron's agents to it. Suddenly, Gandalf discovers that Frodo's friend Sam has been hiding outside and listening to Gandalf and Frodo. At first, Gandalf is furious at Sam's eavesdropping, but then he recruits Sam to be Frodo's travel partner and protector. Sam and Frodo leave Bilbo's house, and in very little time, they have ventured further from the Shire than ever before. Merry and Pippin, 2 mischievous hobbits, who are fleeing a farmer from whom they've stolen, encounter Sam and Bilbo and join their party. The ring wraiths ride by, and the hobbits narrowly escape detection. Frodo is tempted to put on the ring, but Sam stops him. This urge is Frodo's first insight into the power and temptation of the ring. The hobbits arrive at the town of Bree and enter the inn known as the Prancing Pony, where they are supposed to meet Gandalf, but the wizard isn't there. The ring accidentally slips onto Frodo's finger, alerting the ring wraiths to his whereabouts. A ranger named Strider introduces himself to the group of hobbits and urges them to be more careful. The wraiths arrive at the hotel, but the hobbits, thanks to Strider, are well hidden. Strider explains to them that the wraiths were formerly the 9 human kings who had the 9 human rings. They are hunting the ring because finding it is the only way they can come back to life. Meanwhile, Gandalf has approached another wizard, Saruman, for counsel. Saruman already knows about the ring and Sauron's attempt to regain power. He declares that Mordor cannot be defeated and that the 2 wizards must join with Sauron. Gandalf protests and the wizards battle. Sauron wins and imprisons Gandalf atop his giant tower in Isengard. At his tower, Sauron is constructing a terrifying army with the intention of waging war on Middle-earth. A moth rouses Gandalf and takes a message from him, and a giant eagle answers his plea and saves him from imprisonment. Strider and the hobbits head for Rivendell, home of the elves. They stop at a hill called Weathertop, where Strider hands the hobbits weapons and suggests they make camp for the night. The hobbits foolishly light a fire at their campsite, and the ringwraiths spot them. The ringwraiths stab Frodo, but Strider fights them off and saves Frodo's life. Arwen, an elf princess, finds the party and hurries to Rivendell with Frodo, barely evading the wraiths. Frodo is cured and wakes to discover Gandalf by his side. Bilbo, who has aged significantly, is also at Rivendell, having just completed the book of his adventures, There and Back Again, A Hobbit's Tale. Elrond, the king of the elves and Arwen's father, tells Gandalf that the ring cannot stay in Rivendell but must go further. Pessimistic about the future of Middle-earth, Elrond claims that the time of the elves is over, the dwarves are too selfish to help, and men are weak. The ring survives because of Isildur's weakness. Moreover, the line of human kings is broken, though the heir of Gondor, who has chosen exile, can reunite them. Shortly after this declaration, we learn that Strider's true name is Aragorn, and that he is the heir of Gondor. We also learn that Aragorn and Arwen are in love and have been for many years. However, this love requires that Arwen sacrifice her immortality, one of the chief attributes of elves. Elrond convenes a meeting and announces that the races must come together to defeat Mordor. Frodo presents the ring, and Elrond insists that it must be destroyed in the fires of Mount Doom, where it was made. There is some disagreement as to who will undertake this arduous task, and eventually Frodo emerges. Others step forward to accompany Frodo, forming a Fellowship of the Ring. The Fellowship includes the hobbits, Frodo, Sam, Merry, and Pippin, one elf, Legolas, one dwarf, Gimli, the wizard Gandalf, and two humans, Aragorn and Boromir. Boromir is the son of the steward of Gondor, who has ruled the kingdom in the absence of the rightful king. The Fellowship sets forth from Rivendell. Saruman causes an avalanche of snow to block the group's attempt to cross the pass of Caradhras, and they decide to enter the realm of the dwarves, the Mines of Moria. Inside Moria, the party discovers that all the dwarves have been killed, and soon the Fellowship is surrounded by an army of orcs, inhuman creatures that are also brutal, ruthless warriors. The orcs disperse, however, at the approach of a Balrog, a demonic creature from the underworld. The Fellowship flees this creature as the mines collapse. Gandalf stays behind to battle the Balrog, which he sends collapsing to the depths of the mines. However, as the Balrog falls, it grabs hold of Gandalf's legs and drags the wizard down with it. The Fellowship emerges from the mines, saddened by the loss of Gandalf, but Aragorn insists they have no time to mourn and must press on. Coming to a forest, the Sylvan elves, led by Galadriel, the Lady of the Woods, meet the Fellowship. That evening, the lady and Frodo speak in private. She asks him to look into a mirror, which is a basin of water, and tell her what he sees. He sees visions of the Shire destroyed, of his companions surrounded by orcs, and of the huge fiery eye of Sauron. The lady tells him he has seen visions of what will happen if his mission fails. She warns him that the Fellowship is breaking, and that one by one the ring will destroy them all. Frodo doubts his ability to accomplish his task on his own, but she says that as the ring bearer, he is already alone. If he does not accomplish the task, no one will. The lady encourages Frodo and gives him a parting gift, a star of light that will illuminate his path when all other lights go out. The next day, the Fellowship departs in boats down the river. Meanwhile, Saruman has dispatched Uruk-hai, unusually large and powerful creatures whose sole mission is to destroy the world of men after the party, with the instructions to kill everyone but bring the hobbits back alive. After docking on dry land, Frodo wanders off, and Boromir follows. Frodo is determined to go off alone, but Boromir wants the ring. He is about to attack Frodo for it when Frodo puts on the ring and disappears. This is the longest period of time that Frodo has ever worn the ring, and he has his longest look yet at the fiery eye of Sauron. When Frodo takes the ring off, Aragorn is beside him. Frodo distrusts him too, but Aragorn passes the test that Boromir failed. He tells Frodo to run off and turns to face the approaching army of Uruk-hai. Boromir also fights valiantly, but is badly wounded. The Uruk-hai capture Pippin and Merry. Aragorn wins an epic battle with an Uruk-hai, then rushes to the fallen Boromir, who confesses that he tried to steal the ring from Frodo. Boromir says he has failed the group, but Aragorn tells Boromir he has fought bravely. Boromir swears allegiance to Aragorn, his rightful king, as he dies. Back at the river, Frodo regrets having the ring, but remembers Gandalf's words about his destiny. He departs in a boat, but Sam insists on coming along. Though he can't swim, Sam jumps in the water, and Frodo is forced to rescue his flailing friend and pull him on board. Once safe, Sam reminds Frodo that he made a promise never to leave him. On the water's opposite side, Sam and Frodo climb a mountain and spot Mordor in the distance. What the Lord of the Rings says about the culture that produced it. John Ronald Reuel Tolkien was born in 1892 and fought in World War I, making him a product of the Edwardian era. I feel this is largely reflected in the culture of the hobbits and their homeland, the Shire. The main character, Frodo Baggins, starts the story having just inherited Bag End, his ancestral home, from his uncle Bilbo. Many residents of the Shire are upset by this transfer of title, as they are distant cousins of Bilbo and Frodo and hope to inherit themselves. This familial drama over who will inherit the estate reminds me of the main conflict in another piece of British media, Downton Abbey. The Edwardian and post-Edwardian eras acted as a transitional period away from the strict rules and expectations of the Victorian era, and then of course World War I changed everything. Tolkien seems to have preserved his own idealized version of England when creating the Shire, much like the pastoral works discussed in our textbook. While there are squabbles over property, the majority of hobbits seem to be middle or working class, like Tolkien's own family. Frodo is wealthy enough to have hired Sam as his gardener, but the books put an emphasis on transcending race and class to work toward a common goal. It also warns heavily against greed, with the ring as a symbol of wealth and power. What I find compelling. Friendship is a heavy theme in Lord of the Rings, and many argue that the relationship between Sam and Frodo is actually a romantic one. Tolkien said that he based their relationship on ones he witnessed during World War I, between upper-class officers and their batmen in the trenches. Tolkien had named certain tender moments between Frodo and Sam as those he found most moving from all of the books. They often hold each other, hold hands, and kiss on multiple occasions. Sam is even described at one point as a small creature defending its mate. While these scenes are written with a certain amount of authenticity that comes with first-hand experience of same-sex attraction, Tolkien never admitted to being queer himself. It could be that he was disheartened by the spread of toxic masculinity and simply wanted to encourage more young men to engage in platonic physical affection with their friends. Either way, I think the characters in the books and the movies are a great example of wholesome men who aren't afraid to show their feelings. But these characters have been seen and interpreted as queer and therefore are embraced by the LGBTQ community as representation. I mentioned earlier that The Lord of the Rings essentially birthed the fantasy genre. Tolkien took existing creatures from mythology and adapted them to fit his world and the story he was trying to tell. Several of his creations, including creatures and languages, had heavy influence from Icelandic and Old Norse scripts. He also invented fantasy races, and they're still used today. Orcs are a playable race in Dungeons & Dragons, World of Warcraft, and other fantasy games. They may draw influence from trolls, giants, and other barbaric creatures, but they were Tolkien's own invention. Gary Gygax, co-creator of the fantasy role-playing game Dungeons & Dragons, claimed that Tolkien influenced his creation very little, and that any similarities were included purposefully as a marketing tactic. However, given the years that have passed, D&D and Lord of the Rings are now heavily intertwined. At DragonCon, an annual multi-genre convention for nerds of all variety, you will find dice cases branded with the leaf of Lorien, Legolas cosplayers sitting in the gaming floor, and attendees dressed as their own original characters attending performances by an elf choir. My dad first introduced me to fantasy by reading The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit to me as a bedtime story. One of my first video games was The Hobbit for GameCube. He was so excited when Peter Jackson's film adaptations were released. The entire family went to see each one in theaters. I remember sketching costume designs for each of us, myself as Arwen, my sister as Eowyn, and so on. I've watched the extended editions, the director and actor commentaries, and all the behind-the-scenes footage I could get my hands on. As I grew up, I joined other fandoms, Marvel, Doctor Who, Game of Thrones, and now I play Dungeons & Dragons. I can see the thread of Tolkien's inspiration through most of them, and I'm forever grateful for the seed that he planted. I hope you can see this shirt enough to appreciate it, because I did have to dig through a bunch of laundry to find it. Come on. Thank you. Thank you. You're all right. I know you don't like it when I film, because I gotta close the door. I know. Thanks. I know. Just a few more minutes.